The Mediterranean sun painted the marble balconies of Monte Carlo in gold, each shimmer reflecting off glass towers where fortunes were lost and remade nightly. At the heart of this empire stood the Casino Moretti, an institution older than some nations, dripping in velvet, chandeliers, and whispers of wealth. It bore the family name, and at its center was Elise Moretti, the daughter of Monaco's most powerful dynasty. She was the kind of woman who entered a room like a spark catching fire. Eyes followed her gowns, her jewels, the tilt of her chin. She was 32, impossibly poised, her beauty sharpened by a confidence that seemed unshakable. To the public, Elise embodied Monaco's glittering dream, money without consequence, elegance without effort. Yet behind the closed shutters of her penthouse suite, she was something else entirely. Her reflection stared back at her that evening, the mask of perfection cracking under her own scrutiny. She traced the faint line forming at the corner of her mouth, the sleepless shadows darkening her eyes. The empire adored her, but Elise knew adoration was fragile. In a city where luck turned on a card flip, reputation could be destroyed just as quickly. "Madame, the driver is ready," her assistant called from outside the dressing room. Elise smoothed her hair, forcing her smile to return. "Tell him I'll be down in 5. The voice that carried out into the hall was warm, steady, a performance honed by years of practice. But as the assistant's footsteps faded, Elise's fingers trembled against the marble vanity. Downstairs, the casino's grand lobby filled with aristocrats and tourists alike, all under the intoxicating spell of champagne and possibility. The air thrummed with the clatter of chips and the muted gasp of wins and losses. Elise walked through the crowd, sequined gown glittering, a queen amid her kingdom. "Bonsoir, Mada. Mi Moretti," a shareholder greeted, kissing her hand. She smiled. "Bonsoir. May fortune favor you tonight." Her words were flawless, her demeanor effortless, but inside Elise's thoughts rattled like dice in a cup. Every glance lingered too long, every compliment carried suspicion. She felt watched, not by the crowd, but by shadows that never left her mind. She paused briefly at the baccarat table, her father's portrait hanging above like a stern guardian. Vittorio Moretti had built this empire from nothing, teaching his children that wealth was survival, and survival demanded ruthlessness. Elise carried his lessons like scripture, but his death had left more than inheritance. It had left expectation, and expectation, she knew, was a blade pressed against her throat. "Elise," a familiar voice purred from behind. She turned to find Marcello, one of Monaco's minor princes, his smile too polished, his gaze lingering. "You've outdone yourself tonight." "You flatter me," she replied, holding her chin higher. "Only the truth. But be careful. Too much brilliance draws envy." Her eyes narrowed, though her lips never faltered. "Envy is the tax of power, Marcello. I can afford it." The prince laughed, but Elise felt the weight of his words long after he drifted back into the crowd. Envy. The word clung to her like perfume she could not wash off. Hours later, retreating to her private balcony above the casino, Elise stood alone. The Mediterranean stretched out beneath the moon, vast and indifferent. She lit a cigarette, the ember glowing against her trembling fingers. The laughter from the floor below carried upward, muffled, hollow. For a moment, Elise let the mask fall completely. Her lips pressed tight, her breath shallow. She whispered into the night air, "They'll never take it from me." The waves answered with silence. Behind her, the glass doors slid open. A shadow lingered. Ed, just inside the suite, watching, waiting. Elise did not notice, not yet. Luca Moretti had never cared for the glittering halls of the casino, where Elise thrived under chandeliers and champagne toasts. He preferred the quiet corners, the places where conversations died into silence and truths slipped out unguarded. That night, as Elise smoked on the balcony, Luca lingered just beyond the doorway, the dim light catching the sharp line of his jaw. He studied her with the kind of gaze that carried both admiration and accusation. For years, she had been the star, and he the forgotten shadow orbiting her flame. To Monaco's elite, Luca was little more than the brother. 28, soft-spoken, an heir without the charisma to command a room. While Elise inherited the family's charm, Luca inherited something else. His father's suspicion, his hunger for control. "Elise," he said finally, his voice low, careful. She turned, startled, the cigarette burning between her fingers. "Luca, you nearly gave me a heart attack. You looked tired." His eyes flicked to the dark smudges beneath hers. "The casino wears on you more than you admit." Her laugh was brittle. "Don't start tonight. I've carried this empire since Father died. Do you think that's easy?" Narration carried the weight of what she didn't say. The ledger she hid, the late nights spent moving money like chess pieces, the fear that someone would discover the holes in her glittering kingdom. Luca stepped closer, the night air thick between them. "I don't think it's easy. I just think you've forgotten it doesn't all belong to you." His words cut deeper than she expected. Elise forced a smile, crushing the cigarette in the ashtray. "Still chasing Father's ghost, are you? Always trying to measure up, but never quite reaching." Description filled the silence. The distant hum of engines from the harbor, the sound of laughter rising from the casino floor, the faint tremble of Elise's hand as she poured herself a drink. Luca's eyes narrowed. "Careful, sister. You're not as untouchable as you think." For a moment, their gazes locked. Not as siblings, but as rivals bound by blood and resentment. Elise broke the stare first, turning back toward the glittering view. "You should leave the business to me," she said coldly. "You were never made for it." "And you were?" His voice hardened, rising for the first time. "Elise, you're building a palace of mirrors. One crack, and it all comes down." Her glass clinked against the marble railing. "Then pray it doesn't crack." Narration pulled the scene into his thoughts. Luca had grown used to her dismissals, but tonight her arrogance struck differently. Something inside him shifted, a decision forming, heavy, dangerous. He watched her retreat into the suite, her silhouette swallowed by gold light. Alone now, Luca leaned against the balcony rail, staring down at the casino where fortunes turned in seconds. He knew the truth about Elise's empire, or at least part of it, and the more he saw, the less he could remain silent. The shadow she feared was not outside her window. It lived within her own family. The glow of dawn spilled over Monaco's coastline, but Elise had not slept. She sat in her private study, curtains drawn, the only light coming from the desk lamp that cast sharp shadows across stacks of documents. Numbers sprawled across ledgers, glowing screens displayed encrypted transfers, and beside her, a tumbler of whiskey sat half-finished. Narration deepened the moment. For all her glamour and poise in public, Elise was nothing more than a juggler in private, juggling accounts, debts, and secrets. The Moretti fortune was vast, but it was not endless, and Elise had learned that appearances mattered more than solvency. Her father had taught her ruthlessness, and ruthlessness had become survival. She scrolled through a bank's offshore portal, her reflection ghosting on the screen. Millions shifted from casino accounts into shell companies scattered across the Caribbean. To Elise, it was art. A performance hidden in decimals and transfers. To the world, it would be embezzlement. "Password accepted," the machine chimed. She leaned back, exhaling. "Another day safe," she whispered to herself. But the truth was more fragile than she admitted. Gaps were forming in the walls she'd built, mistakes born of exhaustion. One ledger, an old one, contained numbers she had forgotten to cover. A knock startled her, papers scattered as she slammed the laptop shut. "Elise?" It was her assistant Celine, timid as always. "The auditors are asking for clarification on last quarter's reports." Elise forced her voice steady. "Tell them I'll handle it personally, and remind them, delays are unacceptable." "Yes, madame." The footsteps retreated, leaving Elise alone again. She pressed her palms into her temples, the beginnings of a headache pulsing through her skull. Description filled the silence, the tick of the antique clock, the faint rustle of the sea outside, the sound of her pen scratching against the ledger as she crossed out a line, rewriting history with ink. Her phone buzzed. A message blinked across the screen. "They're watching closer than you think. Be careful." No name, no number, just a warning. Elise's chest tightened. She deleted the text instantly, but the paranoia dug its claws deeper. She poured another drink, her hands shaking. Moments later, she opened the hidden drawer beneath her desk. Inside lay another ledger, the one she swore no one would ever see. It contained every secret transfer, every falsified expense, every bribe dressed as consultancy fees. The book itself was worth more than her life. She ran her fingers along its edge. As long as this stays hidden, I stay untouchable. But narration revealed the cracks. Luca's words echoed from the balcony. One crack, and it all comes down. He didn't know yet, but he was watching, and Elise was running out of time before someone else did too. She closed the ledger carefully, locking it away. Still, her mind spiraled. What if the auditors saw what she missed? What if Luca dug too deeply? What if the wrong person found the book? Later that evening, Elise descended to the casino floor once again, gown shimmering, smile practiced. Cameras flashed. Guests clapped. The Queen of Monte Carlo had returned to her stage. Madame Moretti, a banker approached, bowing slightly. His tone was courteous, but his eyes sharp. We should meet soon. Some irregularities need clarification. Her smile did not falter. Of course, my office will arrange it. But beneath her calm facade, her pulse hammered in her ears. As the banker melted back into the crowd, Elise lifted her glass, the crystal trembling just slightly against her lips. She forced another laugh, dazzling, distracting, the laugh of a woman who had never known fear. Yet above her, unseen in the mezzanine, Luca leaned against the railing, eyes fixed on his sister. He had noticed the tremor, the unease, and in that moment, he began to believe his suspicions were more than paranoia. The Moretti casino glowed brighter than ever that night, lit not only by chandeliers but by expectation. Elise had spared no expense for the gala, an annual spectacle that drew princes, tycoons, and starlets into its golden halls. It was not merely a party. It was theater, staged to remind the world that the Moretti dynasty remained untouchable. Narration carried the weight. Elise needed this illusion now more than ever. Rumors of irregularities drifted through Monaco's social circles like smoke. The auditors were circling, the bankers asking questions. But tonight her mission was simple: dazzle them until they forgot their doubts. She descended the grand staircase like royalty, the sweep of her gown cascading in sequins. Cameras flashed, applause rippled through the crowd. To them, Elise Moretti was flawless. Only Elise felt the cracks under the surface. Bonsoir, Madame Moretti. Marcello, the prince from earlier, greeted with a theatrical bow. I had feared Monaco might shine less brightly without you. Elise smiled, voice smooth as silk. Then I suppose I've saved the city once again. Laughter erupted, glasses clinked. For a moment the mask held. Description drew the eye across the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers refracting light across mirrored walls, roulette wheels humming in the distance, a symphony playing softly as champagne towers shimmered. Everything sparkled, everything lied. At the edge of the crowd, Luca stood apart, his dark suit blending into shadow. He did not applaud, he only watched, studying the tightness in his sister's smile, the faint hesitation in her laugh. He saw the tremor the crowd ignored. Later, Elise mingled among the investors. A shareholder leaned close, voice lowered beneath the orchestra. We've heard whispers, madame. Missing funds, creative bookkeeping, surely nothing to worry about. Elise's response was flawless, a masterclass in composure. Whispers are the currency of envy. Numbers, however, do not lie. And our numbers, she said, lifting her glass with a dazzling smile, have never been stronger. The man chuckled, reassured, drifting away, but Elise's throat tightened as the champagne slid down. Narration lingered, every question felt like an accusation, every handshake like a test. She excused herself to the powder room, gripping the marble counter as her reflection stared back. The woman in the mirror looked like a goddess, painted lips, jeweled earrings, an empire draped across her shoulders, but Elise saw the truth, exhaustion carved beneath her eyes, fear flickering in the corners. Her whisper cracked against the silence. Hold it together. Just one night. From behind, a voice interrupted. Luca. You wear the mask well, sister, he said, leaning in the doorway. His tone was casual, but his eyes sharp. Elise's back stiffened. You shouldn't be in here. I was curious, he replied softly. whether the queen still believes in her crown. She forced a smirk. Jealousy doesn't suit you, Luca. Neither does panic, he shot back, before stepping away, leaving her with only her reflection and the sting of his words. When Elise returned to the ballroom, the gala was in full swing. Lights dimmed, music swelled, dancers took the floor. Guests clapped and cheered, unaware of the quiet war brewing between the Moretti heirs. Elise raised her glass high, smile unshakable. Yet narration revealed her truth. Beneath the sequins and champagne, fear gnawed at her like a rat in the walls. And across the room, Luca whispered to himself, unseen, "One crack, that's all it takes." Monaco was a city of whispers. Beneath its glittering facade of yachts and champagne towers, truth always leaked in murmurs. Elise Moretti knew this well, and feared it. A dynasty was not undone by a single headline, but by the quiet erosion of reputation, one rumor at a time. Narration pressed into the shadows. Elise's life was no longer her own. Her secrets lived in other mouths, her mistakes carried by those close enough to see what she tried to hide. The whispers had begun to spread, slipping through casino corridors and high-rise boardrooms alike. The first came from Celine, her loyal assistant. Celine had worked for Elise for 6 years, answering midnight calls, covering sudden absences, carrying sealed envelopes to men with briefcases. She had always kept her head down. But loyalty, Elise forgot, was fragile when fear entered the equation. That morning, as Celine poured coffee in the penthouse office, her voice trembled. "Madame, the auditors requested access to original ledgers. I delayed them, but they won't wait forever." Elise snatched the papers from her hand. "Then delay harder. Do you understand me?" "Yes, madame." But narration lingered. Celine's eyes no longer held blind obedience. They carried hesitation, the hesitation of someone who had begun to wonder if silence might one day cost her everything. The second whisper came from Henry Duval, a banker whose reputation was built on discretion. He had managed Moretti accounts for decades, and yet, when Luca invited him for a quiet drink at the harbor, Henry did not refuse. Over glasses of cognac, Luca leaned in. "You've seen things, Henry. Numbers that don't align, transfers that shouldn't exist." The banker stirred his drink, eyes fixed on the amber liquid. "I see what I'm told to see, but others may not be so blind." "You mean the regulators?" Luca pressed. Henry looked up at him then, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. "I mean those who envy her power, and envy, Monsieur Moretti, is more dangerous than any auditor." The words were carefully chosen, but their weight lingered. Luca left the meeting certain of one thing. Elise's empire was balanced on a thread thinner than she realized. The third whisper came not from business, but from Elise's heart. Late one night, in the private suite above the casino, she lay wrapped in the arms of her lover, Adrien Rousseau, a journalist with charm as sharp as his pen. Their affair was fire and danger, hidden from cameras and family alike. "Elise," Adrien murmured, brushing hair from her face. "People are talking. They say you're hiding something." Her body stiffened. "People always talk. This is different." His gaze searched hers. "If there's truth in it, tell me now. I can protect you, Befin, or it turns ugly." She pushed him away, her voice icy. "You're not here to protect me. You're here because I allow it." Adrian's silence stretched. Then he rose, pulling on his shirt. "Secrets don't stay secrets in this city. One day, someone will sell yours for a higher price." Description sharpened the moment. The crumpled sheets, the balcony doors left open to the midnight sea, the lonely silhouette Elise made as Adrien walked out without looking back. By the week's end, whispers had grown louder. The staff exchanged glances in the corridors. Investors lingered too long in hushed conversations. Even the dealers on the casino floor had begun to wonder why Elise paced her office late at night, shadows stretched against drawn blinds. Narration closed with inevitability. The mask Elise wore was slipping, not from her own hands but from the mouths of others. Her secrets were no longer confined to ledgers. They had become currency, traded in whispers she could not control. And across the harbor, Luca listened, He heard the murmurs, the doubts, the rumors tightening like a noose. For the first time in his life, his sister's empire seemed not untouchable, but breakable. Luca Moretti had grown up in Elise's shadow, and for years he accepted it. She was the heir, the star, the face of the dynasty. He was the brother who stood at her side, silent, dutiful, expected to admire the empire she controlled. But now the whispers had reached him, and whispers, he knew, were rarely wrong. Narration lingered on his dilemma. Luca was not blind to ambition. He wanted power too, wanted to be more than the forgotten Moretti. Yet confronting Elise meant betraying blood, shattering what little bond remained between them. It was not merely a choice between truth and silence. It was a choice between family and self. He began quietly, a late-night visit to the casino offices. The building was mostly empty, save for guards who nodded as he passed. Luca moved through the corridors with measured calm, but his pulse raced. He had memorized the layout, knew which doors Elise locked, which drawers she never let anyone touch. In her office, the air still smelled faintly of her perfume. The marble desk gleamed, immaculate, except for one drawer. Locked, as always. Luca slid a key from his pocket. Not Elise's key. His. He had bribed a locksmith weeks earlier, just in case. The lock clicked open. Inside lay stacks of papers, folders marked with innocuous labels. He flipped through them. Contracts, invoices, bank statements. At first glance, everything appeared legitimate, but Luca's eyes caught the details. The same signatures repeated across different dates, figures that didn't match, transfers that circled back into accounts with no names. "God, Elise," he whispered under his breath. "What have you done?" The documents spoke louder than any accusation. Elise wasn't just bending rules. She was bleeding the empire dry, millions hidden, shuffled, disguised. It was survival perhaps, but also theft. Description painted the moment, Luca's hands trembling as he spread the papers across the desk. The faint hum of the casino below, muffled through the floor, the portrait of their father looming above, eyes stern, watching. The office door creaked. Luca shoved the files back into the drawer, heart hammering. Celine stood there, startled. "Monsieur Moretti, what are you doing here?" He forced a calm smile. "Looking after the family's interests, same as you." Celine hesitated. She held her folder tighter, her eyes darting to the locked drawer. "You should be careful. Elise doesn't forgive trespasses." Luca stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me, Celine, how long have you known?" Her silence was as answer enough. "You're loyal," he continued. "But how long can you protect her before she drags you down with her?" Celine swallowed hard, then whispered, "She says she's saving the casino. That without her, everything collapses." Luca's jaw tightened. "She's destroying it." Their exchange ended abruptly as footsteps echoed in the hall. Elise herself entered, radiant in a black dress, her smile freezing when she saw Luca inside her office. "Interesting," she said coolly. "My brother, rifling through my desk. Should I be worried?" Luca straightened, hiding the tension in his voice. "Only if you've given me reason." Elise closed the door behind her, her presence filling the room like perfume laced with poison. "You think you can outplay me, Luca? This empire is mine. Always has been." "It was Father's," he shot back. "You've turned it into your personal vault." For a moment their voices fell silent, only the faint ticking of the clock between them, brother and sister, heirs of the same bloodline, divided by greed and truth. Elise smiled faintly, tilting her head. "Careful. You wouldn't want envy to ruin you." Luca met her gaze, unflinching. "It's not envy, Elise. It's survival." Narration closed the moment. Elise dismissed him with a laugh, as though his accusations were childish. But inside, Luca carried the weight of what he had seen. He could no longer pretend ignorance. The choice pressed heavier: betray his sister, or let her destroy them both. That night, as he left the casino, the streets of Monaco shimmered with reflected lights from the harbor. Luca walked alone, the sea breeze sharp against his face. He knew his path now. Elise had chosen deception, he would choose exposure. And somewhere in the night, Elise watched from her balcony, cigarette glowing in the dark. Her eyes followed her brother's retreating figure, suspicion settling in her chest. The war between them had begun. The Casino de Monte Carlo gleamed that evening like a palace of glass and light. Chandeliers glowed, violins swelled from the mezzanine, and Monaco's elite glided across marble floors in gowns and tuxedos. It was more than a shareholder meeting. It was a performance, a ritual to remind the world that the Moretti Empire stood unshaken. Narration tightened the mood. Beneath the sparkle lurked tension, invisible but thick, like perfume gone sour. Elise Moretti had orchestrated every detail. She would step on stage radiant, deliver her polished speech, and drown the whispers in champagne and applause. What she hadn't calculated was Luca. He stood in the wings, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on his sister. For weeks he had debated, torn between silence and exposure. But now the papers in his pocket, copies of her falsified transfers, burned against his chest. Tonight, the truth would no longer hide. Elise entered with the grace of royalty. Her dress shimmered like liquid silver. Her smile disarmed even the most cynical investors. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice calm, commanding. "The Moretti legacy is stronger than ever. Our revenues exceed forecasts. Our future is secure." Polite applause. Cameras flashed. Elise thrived in this theater. Yet her brother's stare pierced her confidence. Description filled the moment. Luca stepping forward into the spotlight, his presence drawing murmurs from the crowd. Elise's hand tightening on the podium. The investors leaning forward, sensing drama, like gamblers waiting on a final card. "Secure?" Luca's voice rang out. "Tell them how secure, Elise. Tell them about the millions moved offshore. Tell them about the shell accounts in Zurich." Gasps rippled through the hall. Elise froze, her polished composure cracking. "Elise?" one investor asked nervously. "Is this true?" She laughed lightly, though her eyes blazed at Luca. "My brother enjoys theatrics. He should be writing novels, not meddling in business." Luca strode closer, his hand lifting the folder high. "These are not theatrics. These are the receipts. You've been embezzling from the casino you swore to protect." Silence crushed the room. The word embezzling echoed like a gunshot. Elise's voice sharpened, venom wrapped in silk. "You think you can humiliate me in front of them? This empire is mine, Luca. I built it while you coasted in my shadow." Dialogue cut through the air, brittle and raw. Luca: "Father built it. You bled it dry." Elise: "You call it theft. I call it strategy. Do you think these walls keep their shine by chance? Power costs." Luca: "And you expect us to pay the price for your greed?" Elise: "Better my greed than your weakness?" The investors stirred like restless jurors, some whispering Elise's defense, others leaning toward Luca's fire. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras zooming in on Elise's tense smile. Narration carried the tension higher. Elise's empire had always been bound by appearances, and now those appearances cracked. The mighty Heiress stood cornered, her brother holding the blade. Celine hovered by the wall, pale, torn between silence and betrayal. She knew Luca was right, but Elise's wrath was legendary. Her eyes darted between them, a silent witness to a dynasty unraveling. Elise slammed her palm on the podium. "Enough! This spectacle demeans us both. Do you think investors care about your moral crusade, Luca? They care about returns, and as long as I stand here, they will have them." But Luca refused to yield. He flung the documents onto the marble floor, papers scattering like broken cards. "Look at them. Look at what she's done. This is your heiress. This is the truth." Investors rose from their seats, voices overlapping. Questions, accusations, demands. The orderly gala collapsed into chaos. Elise's smile vanished entirely now, replaced by fury so sharp it seemed to cut the air. Description slowed the scene, Elise clutching the podium until her knuckles whitened, Luca standing tall in the storm, his chest heaving, cameras capturing every flicker of rage, every tremor of fear. She leaned forward, her voice low but audible through the microphone. "You've made your choice, brother. Remember it. Because now you're my enemy." Narration sealed the moment. The room did not applaud, did not rise in support. Instead, It fractured, trust bleeding out like spilled wine. Elise's empire, once untouchable, now trembled on the brink. As Luca turned to leave, Elise's eyes followed him, glittering with a hatred deeper than any wound. And in that hatred, something darker formed. A thought, a plan, a resolve. The public row was not the end. It was the spark. And in Monaco, sparks had a way of lighting infernos. The night after the public row, the Casino de Monte Carlo lay quieter than usual. The marble floors were polished, the baccarat tables reset, yet the air carried a faint residue of scandal. Whispers that clung to every chandelier and velvet chair. The Moretti name, once untouchable, now trembled on everyone's lips. Elise sat alone in her private suite above the casino, still in her silver gown, its shimmer dulled by the night's humiliation. A half-empty glass of champagne sat on the table beside her, untouched. Her reflection in the window stared back, fractured by the neon glow of the harbor below. Narration painted her state. The heiress who had ruled Monaco's glittering world now felt the walls closing in. Luca had not only wounded her pride, he had cracked the illusion of her power. Investors questioned, journalists swarmed, and even her closest allies had grown cautious. The kingdom she curated for years had begun to slip. But Elise Moretti was not one to surrender. If Luca thought public exposure would ruin her, he underestimated her resolve. She would gamble everything, her name, her freedom, her soul, to silence him. Description set the mood. The suite smelled of cigarette smoke and roses wilting in a crystal vase. Documents lay strewn across the desk. Bank statements, offshore ledgers, contracts forged and altered. In the dim light, Elise's hands moved like a card dealer's, sorting, discarding, plotting. She picked up her phone, dialing a number she hadn't used in years. A man's voice answered, low, gravelly. Elise. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something sharper. Vincent, I need a favor. Dialogue unfolded like poisoned honey. Vincent. You only call when trouble finds you. Elise. This time trouble has a face. My brother. Vincent. Ah, family. The only enemies we can't escape. Elise. I don't want escape. I want resolution. Vincent. And the cost? Elise. Whatever it takes. Silence hummed through the line, broken by Vincent's faint chuckle. You sound like your father, dangerous when cornered. Narration bridged the moment. Vincent was no ordinary contact. He was a fixer, a shadow who had once cleaned up scandals for the Moretti patriarch. Ruthless, discreet, and loyal only to money. By calling him, Elise crossed a threshold. From heiress to conspirator, from protector of the family name to its executioner. She hung up, her pulse steady, her eyes colder. But in the quiet after the call, Elise's thoughts drifted to Luca. For a moment, the rage softened into something else, memory. A younger Luca running through the casino halls, laughing, tugging her hand toward the gardens. Their childhood had been woven with privilege, but also with shared dreams, promises whispered under chandeliers. She whispered now, almost involuntarily, "Why did you make me your enemy?" Her phone buzzed with a new message. Vincent's words, "Tomorrow, midnight. Be ready." Elise exhaled, tension curling throes. All her body. Tomorrow would decide everything. Description framed her preparation. She slipped out of her gown, stepping into a tailored black suit, sleek, sharp, armor for the battle ahead. She stacked the documents into neat piles, burned what could not be seen, and tucked others into a leather case. Her movements were precise, mechanical, as if each action erased an ounce of doubt. Yet doubt lingered. The mirror caught her expression, not the radiant heiress of Monaco, but a woman with eyes rimmed in steel and sorrow. The next morning, Monaco buzzed with speculation. Headlines screamed about the Moretti feud. Heiress accused of embezzlement. Family dynasty in crisis. Photographers camped outside the casino. Investors withdrew quietly, and gossip thickened in the cafes along the harbor. Narration pulled us closer. Luca became the unexpected hero of the hour, praised for his courage. Elise, meanwhile, was painted as reckless, greedy, unfit. Each article cut deeper, each rumor fueled her desperation. She met with Celine in a quiet cafe, their conversation brittle as glass. Elise: "You've been quiet." Celine: "What would you have me say? That Luca was wrong? He wasn't." Elise: "Loyalty doesn't mean agreeing. It means standing by me when the storm hits." Celine: "And when the storm is of your making?" The words stung, but Elise masked her pain with ice. "If you stand with him, you fall with him. Remember that." Narration carved the tension. Celine lowered her eyes, torn, but Elise knew. Trust had fractured, even here. Allies faded. Enemies multiplied. Her only constant was her resolve. That night Elise returned to her suite, every step echoing the weight of inevitability. Midnight approached. Description heightened the suspense. The clock's hands crept forward. The harbor lights flickered against the waves. The city outside hummed with late-night revelers, oblivious to the storm brewing above. A knock at T's door. 3 short taps. She opened it to find Vincent, tall, dark, expressionless. He carried no bag, no weapon, nothing but the aura of danger. "You're certain?" he asked softly. Elise's gaze was unflinching. Certain. Narration sealed the chapter. In that word lay her final gamble, not a bet of money or reputation, but of blood. Tomorrow, Monaco would awaken to consequences no one could imagine. As Vincent stepped inside, closing the door behind him, Elise knew there was no turning back. The heiress of Monaco had chosen her hand, and she would play it to the very end. The casino was alive again, its chandeliers blazing as if to deny the whispers still circling Monaco. Baccarat chips clinked, dice rolled, laughter echoed. Yet beneath the glamour lay an unspoken tension. Everyone knew about the Moretti feud. Everyone waited for the next move. That night, Elise entered the casino not as a hostess, but as a predator. Her black gown clung to her figure, her diamond earrings catching the light like sharp edges. She smiled for the cameras, waved to investors, and floated through the hall as though nothing had cracked. Yet her every step was calculated, her mind fixed on the plan Vincent had set in motion. Narration pulled us deeper. Elise's humiliation had become rage, and rage demanded resolution. Vincent had been clear. Luca would not live long enough to ruin her again. The marble floors that had witnessed her glory would now bear a darker stain. Across the room, Luca arrived with quiet confidence. He wore a tailored suit, no tie, his hair slightly tousled as though he hadn't planned to attend but came to prove his point. Whispers followed him like shadows. To the guests, he was the truth-teller, the rebel. To Elise, he was the threat. Description sharpened the mood. The contrast between the glittering chandeliers and the storm brewing beneath them. Elise's eyes low, arcing onto her brother's silhouette. Vincent standing at the bar, anonymous, watching. Elise raised her glass, feigning calm, though her pulse drummed in her ears. She approached Luca, her smile a mask of civility. "Elise, you couldn't resist, could you? Even after the circus you caused." Luca: "I came to watch you pretend nothing's happened. It's almost impressive, Elise." Elise: "Careful. Mockery doesn't suit you." Luca: "Truth does." Their words hung like blades. Around them, guests shifted nervously, sensing the undercurrent. Cameras flashed, catching fragments of their duel. Vincent moved closer, silent as smoke. He wasn't dressed like a guest. Dark suit, no tie, eyes cold. He slipped through the crowd with the patience of a predator, his gaze fixed on Luca. Narration heightened the inevitability. Elise had played her hand. Vincent was the card up her sleeve, unseen until it was too late. All that remained was the moment. The orchestra swelled, violins dancing, masking the first signs of violence. Luca leaned in, lowering his voice. "Luca, you think by silencing me, you save yourself? The truth doesn't die with me." Elise: "No, but it loses its audience." Her smile widened, brittle but triumphant. She lifted her glass again, her cue. Description captured the instant. Vincent's hand slipping beneath his jacket, a glint of steel, the chandelier light catching the barrel, Luca's brow furrowing as realization dawned. The shot cracked through the hall like thunder, screams erupted, glasses shattered, guests ducked. Luca staggered, clutching his chest, his white shirt blooming red. His body crumpled onto the marble floor, the sound echoing like a final card dropped on the table. Elise froze, her mask of composure flickering. For all her planning, for all her rage, the sight of her brother bleeding out before her clawed at something raw inside. Childhood laughter, promises made, a bond broken, all of it flashed in that instant. Narration painted the collapse. Chaos consumed the casino, guards rushing, guests fleeing, cameras rolling. Vincent slipped back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he appeared. Elise stood alone in the storm, her hand still gripping her champagne glass like a weapon. Celine, pale and trembling, pushed through the crowd to Luca's side. She pressed her hands against his wound, crying out, "Stay with me, Luca, please." But Luca's eyes found Elise. Blood on his lips, voice faint, he whispered, "You never had to choose this." The words struck her deeper than any bullet. Security stormed the room, shouting orders, sealing exits. Some pointed at Elise, others at the man they swore had fired the shot. But Vincent was gone. Elise remained, her gown unstained, her expression unreadable, heiress and conspirator, sister and executioner. Descriptions slowed the scene, blood spreading across white marble like ink, cameras flashing with morbid hunger. Elise standing still, diamond earrings glinting above her brother's body. Narration carried the weight. The Moretti dynasty, once dazzling and untouchable, now lay broken in the open. Luca's body was proof of betrayal, and Elise's silence screamed guilt. Yet no one could prove her hand had guided the gun. As Luca's final breath slipped away, Elise raised her chin. The tears in her eyes did not fall. For in that moment, she decided, if she could not be innocent, she would be invincible. The morning after the shooting, Monaco awoke to a city cloaked in disbelief. News vans lined the harbor, their satellite dishes pointing skyward, capturing the chaos that had unfolded in the Casino de Monte Carlo. Social media exploded with images of shattered glass, marble stained with blood, and the tragic figure of Luca Moretti crumpled on the floor. Narration drew the picture. The city's glittering facade had fractured. Investors murmured, bankers called urgent meetings, journalists camped outside the Moretti penthouse. The Moretti name, once synonymous with power and elegance, now teetered on the brink of infamy. Elise had survived the night physically unscathed, but the ripples of guilt and suspicion surrounded her like predators circling their prey. Elise appeared in public, flawless as ever. Diamonds glimmered against black silk, her hair cascading in perfect waves. Cameras snapped relentlessly as she delivered the rehearsed statement. Elise, Luca's death is a tragedy beyond comprehension. Our family mourns deeply. We will cooperate fully with the authorities, and I ask for privacy during this painful time. Her voice was steady, controlled, unshakable. Yet narration hinted at the fissures beneath her calm exterior. Each word was carefully measured, each gesture choreographed. Every smile was a mask concealing the storm within. Description painted the scene, microphones jutted like spears toward her face. Flashing cameras turned the press conference into a gladiatorial arena. The marble floors reflected her figure like a painting, beautiful, cold, untouchable. Even as she spoke, whispers grew among her inner circle. Celine, pale and trembling, lingered at the edge of the room. "Madame, are you sure the police won't find something?" Elise's smile tightened. "Then we make sure they don't. Silence is as much a tool as money, Celine. Never forget that." Narration focused on the shifting alliances. Bankers who once fawned over her now watched with wary eyes. Investors who cheered her victories now whispered about withdrawal. Even Vincent, her silent shadow, reminded her that loyalty had its price. Every step she took required careful calculation. One mistake, and the entire empire could crumble. The authorities arrived later that day. Detective Moreau, a man whose patience was as legendary as his suspicion, stepped into the casino office. He scanned the room methodically, noting the polished floors, the scattered ledgers, and the faint scent of perfume lingering in the air. Detective Moreau, "Ms. Moretti, we will need full access to all financial records. The investigation is ongoing." Elise, Of course, detective, anything you need. I want the truth to come to light. Narration pierced the veneer. Her words were lies. Every ledger Vincent had touched, every file she had altered, had been designed to mislead. She was cooperating, yes, but only on her terms. The empire would survive. She would ensure it. By evening, the whispers had grown into headlines. Heiress under suspicion. Monaco dynasty in crisis. Was Luca Moretti silenced? Journalists speculated endlessly, but no one could pin the crime on her. The public eye was fascinated, horrified, and captivated all at once. Description deepened the tension. The city lights flickered across the harbor. The faint echo of sirens weaved into the night. Shadows stretched across Elise's penthouse as she reviewed the news clippings, each one a mixture of fear and opportunity. Her phone buzzed with messages from allies, each laced with caution. Vincent's single word arrived last. Proceed. Elise understood. Survival was now a game of chess. Every move calculated, every opponent weighed. Dialogue cut briefly through the tension when Celine finally spoke, trembling. Celine. Madame, do you think it's over? Elise. Over? No. The game has just begun. Narration underscored the final twist. Elise had won the immediate battle. Luca was gone, the public unaware of her true involvement, her wealth intact, her position unshaken, for now. But the seed of doubt had been planted in every corner of Monaco. Allies might falter. Enemies would grow bolder, and the authorities, patient as predators, were already circling. As she gazed out over the harbor that night, the water reflecting neon streaks like fractured jewels, Elise whispered to herself, "No one takes what is mine, not even blood." Description lingered on the ominous beauty of her empire, the penthouse high above the city, the gleaming roulette wheels in the casino below, the city alive with secrets and whispers. The stage was set for the next act. Revenge, survival, or downfall. Narration concluded the chapter. And the story arc. Elise Moretti had gambled everything and won. But the cost of victory was heavier than gold. The empire stood, but at the edge of darkness. Every ally, every friend, every enemy now knew that the heiress of Monaco was not to be crossed. And somewhere in the shadows, Vincent waited, patient and silent. The game was far from over. Months had passed since the shooting, yet Monaco had not forgotten. The city gleamed as always, yachts bobbing gently in the harbor, chandeliers reflecting off marble floors, the elite sipping champagne as if nothing had happened. But beneath the polished surface, the echoes of the Moretti scandal lingered. Narration painted the new reality. Elise Moretti still walked among Monaco's elite, her face flawless, her reputation carefully curated, yet the warmth she once commanded had shifted to a cautious respect, tinged with fear. Investors remained hesitant, whispers never fully silenced, and journalists continued to probe, searching for cracks in her polished armor. She moved through her penthouse in the early morning light, the city below stretching like a jeweled map. Her reflection in the window stared back, sharp, cold, beautiful. She had survived, yes, but survival came at a cost. Nights were longer now, sleep restless, dreams haunted by Luca's eyes and the sound of his final words. Description highlighted her isolation, the empty champagne glasses on the marble tab. The faint scent of her perfume mingling with old papers, a single chair pulled close to the window where she often sat alone. Her empire remained intact, yet the walls echoed with the ghosts of choices she could never undo. A knock at the door broke the silence. Celine appeared, tentative as always, holding a folder of new audits and correspondence. Celine. Madame, the investors want reassurance. They're asking questions again. Elise. They'll get answers, Celine, the truth. On my terms. Celine. And Vincent? Elise's lips curved into a faint smile. Vincent remains indispensable. Discretion is a rare currency. Narration returned. Loyalty was transactional, and Elise had learned that all too well. Friends were cautious. Family ties were severed. Only those who understood fear, or shared it, remained. The city was her stage, but she had grown wary of every shadow, every whisper. She walked to the balcony, overlooking the harbor. The yachts glittered under the midday sun, the waves glittering like broken glass. Monaco appeared untouched, serene, almost indifferent to the violence and betrayal it had witnessed. Yet Elise knew better. Power, she realized, was both fragile and absolute. One misstep could bring everything crashing down. Dialogue cut through her reflection when a young investor approached her in the penthouse lounge. Investor: Madame Moretti, your leadership. It's remarkable. How do you maintain control? Elise: Control, she replied softly, her voice measured, is never given. It's taken, nurtured, and protected. Sometimes by charm, sometimes by force, sometimes quietly. Narration lingered on the chilling undertone, the quiet violence of power, the moral compromises that remained invisible, the unseen calculations that kept an empire alive. Elise had become a master of all three.